Let's talk to James Hill, political correspondent of The Spectator. James, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Good to talk to you. This non-crime hate business doesn't seem to want to go away, does it? We've got the Telegraph reporting today on this Home Office review that not only are you a right-wing extremist, I could be one as well. My dog might even be one, to be honest. But basically, they also would like to see more non-crime hate incidents recorded, even though the last government said they should be done away with altogether.
I mean, this is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, if everyone's an extremist, what's the mainstream? Look, I think that this shows just how unresponsive a lot of police forces really are. And looking at some of the comments that have been reported in the Telegraph today, it's extraordinary, suggesting that, talking about grooming gangs is a right-wing conspiracy theory. Yeah. Trying to disparage critics. And it just shows, I think, the police are at worst with their head firmly buried in the sand.
They really are. And I mean, some of the language used really gives away the mentality inside of the Home Office. And while it looks as though Yvette Cooper has had a reasonably sensible sort of reaction to this, and she doesn't want to implement any of these measures, it tells you that the people working inside of the Home Office have got a very strange view of the world.
Yeah, and obviously I think that, the Home Office was always regarded, even by the last government, as the exceptional department. I mean, most people I spoke to in the sort of Conservative Party who were working in government departments always would say that the departments worked very well. There wasn't so much a blob, but the one exception was the Home Office. The Home Office was very much a law unto itself. Yeah. And I think that this shows very much that the department has a real culture change it needs to learn. And I think that being responsive to public pressures, because non-crime hate incidents have repeatedly been criticised, as you say there. Right. They've repeatedly come under scrutiny. And with the Alison Pearson case, they're clearly indefensible. And yet that's exactly what this report does, and there's no wonder the government's running a million miles from it.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, but I mean, thank goodness, it means they're learning something since they've been in. But how about this, though? Right-wing extremists frequently exploit cases of alleged group-based sexual abuse. This is a quote, to promote anti-Muslim sentiment, as well as related anti-government and anti-political correctness narratives. They're actually using the word alleged about rape gangs. There's nothing alleged about them, is there?
No, completely not. And it shows, I think, a misplacement of priorities if you're more concerned about policing language than actually trying to get serious and trying to clamp down on these issues. I think that the reaction of a lot of people to the grooming gangs inquiry over the past 4 weeks or so has shown that they've got their priorities mixed up and are going to be, I think, unable to learn the lessons of the last few months, which have been that there is no longer the same policing of language that goes on. Yeah. I think that there's going to be a more need for a serious push at this. And as you say, I mean, I'm fascinated to see if the government adopts Islamophobia as official government definition, because I think that will be a whole basket of issues they want to open up.
Well, this is a big problem, isn't it? Because I was talking earlier in the show about this problem with Dr. Paul Stott, because Keir Starmer got himself into all kinds of sort of, torturous wriggle room scenarios when he started trying to define the word terrorism. And it seems to me that part of the problem here is the definition of these words. And he was able to sort of hide behind the fact that, the Southport killer was not determined to be a terrorist because he didn't fit the actual description of one, which seems mad to me. It's a bit like, if they start describing right-wing extremists as people who don't agree with them, then they're going to have an awful lot of right-wing extremists to deal with. They seem to have invented a word called manosphere, which is apparently where you and I probably inhabit, a space which involves an interest in extreme misogyny, gore, and online subcultures and obsessions. I mean, do they not have anything better to do?
Well, I think this is the issue when it comes to following process at the expense of outcome, which is that, as you say, if it's a technical definition, I mean, that seems very much a misplacement of priorities again. And also, let's face it, with Axel Ruda Cabana, it doesn't matter what he was clearly a threat. This man was exhibiting a dangerous pattern of behaviour, and it doesn't matter that he wasn't particularly into ideology. As you say, he had some pretty sick interests. He was someone who was asking his teachers about massacres, etc., age 13, 14, and Prevent should have stopped it because there were 3 times they was referred to it. So I'm less fussed about sort of definitions. I just don't want them to trip up kind of investigations that go on.
No, I agree with you. I think definitions are the purview of lawyers. I mean, part of the problem with a lot of the governments that we've had lately is there's too many bleeding lawyers in there, and they want to try and be specific. It's like they're looking for a definition of Islamophobia, and if it falls outside of that, then it's not Islamophobia. Similarly, if you're a right-wing extremist, it has to fit this little, sort of fence line that they've set up deliberately so that you've inadvertently stepped over it and become a criminal.
Absolutely, and I think that that's going to be a huge amount of paperwork, isn't it? And actually, is that about the public sector delivery that people voted for a Labour government for in July? I don't think it is. No. And I think they should be very careful of given all the reviews they've commissioned, one every 2.5 days or so.
Yeah, absolutely right. A couple of other things to catch up on in the Telegraph. We've got Wes Streeting now giving up on some targets that he was going to try and hit for women's health. The NHS just sort of leaps from bad to worse, doesn't it? You know, you've got not enough doctors, not enough nurses, not enough ambulances, not enough treatments being held. We've got another crisis going on. I mean, Wes Streeting's gone quite quiet, hasn't he, about all of the things that he wanted to do, because all of them have all been sort of shoved to the background.
Well, I'm fascinated by the latest attack on Nigel Farage, which is that he has a miserablest view of Britain.
Yeah.
This is the health secretary who can't do an interview without saying how broken the NHS is. So not exactly sure how that all stacks up. But as you say, getting into office, I'm just delighted that, you know, if they're canning the women's health strategy, they presumably can now define what a woman is.
Well, that would be helpful, wouldn't it? Maybe they can change some of the documentation that's been produced by various health trusts around the country. But yeah, I mean, there's an awful lot of things that seem to be kind of just going round and round and round. I mean, we were talking about Ed Miliband just before the news there. You know, he seems to be more and more isolated from the rest of the government. You know, all these conversations about expanding Heathrow, putting in a third runway, how growth and net zero are not two issues that can run side by side. It's either one or the other. He's sounding more and more kind of detached from government, almost though he's not part of it.
Well, I think that really what it's shown this Heathrow expansion is the two kind of elements of Keir Starmer's leadership coming up against each other. Of course, when he ran for leader, he very much ran as a green leftist. He was hailing the fact that the Heathrow expansion was blocked in February 2020. And then, of course, from about 2022 onwards, he's suddenly saying, no, I'm much more about economic growth. I'm much more on the Rachel Reeves camp. And these two figures, Miliband and Reeves, have really clashed in the two big cabinet battles of the past year. The first was, of course, about the 28 billion figure. That was scrapped, so Reeves won that. And the second was another one Reeves won, which was winter fuel. Miliband led the cabinet resistance against that. And now we've got third issue, which is about carbon budgets versus, you know, ordinary pocketbooks. I suspect Reeves will win this one again, but again, it does leave the question about how many votes is Ed Miliband going to win the Labour Party and how many is he going to cost next time around.
Right. And the other guy who's kind of still under fire a bit is Lord Hermer, isn't he, the Attorney General. He's come out and admitted, basically, that he has conflicts of interest, that he has had to recuse himself from giving advice to the government in certain situations. Well, surely that makes him unfit for purpose as an Attorney General, doesn't it?
Well, I think it all depends on how he implements his policy, doesn't it? And in terms of are we going to see those vested interests manifest themselves on government decision-making? I do think it shows perhaps the danger of appointing someone who's never been in Parliament before.
Yeah.
Lord Hermer, first Attorney General in more than 100 years to have never sat in either House of Parliament. And I think that it says something that what was previously one of the government's supposed strengths, you know, it's important, talking on about rights a lot, etc., is now turning into a perceived weakness. And you see that with the election of Trump, the Chagos Islands, etc., and of course the bizarre decision to go along with the International Criminal Court's ruling on Israel. All of those have real world consequences. So I think that Lord Hermer is already irritating some of his Labour colleagues in government.
Well, he is, and in fact, the reason I suppose I said what I said is that, you know, if you're an Attorney General, i.e. supposedly an advisor to the Prime Minister on legal matters and other things, if you can't advise him on those things because of your previous history with various clients who all seem to have had some gripe with Great Britain, you know, whether it's Shamima Begum or Jerry Adams or some dodgy asylum seekers coming from Sri Lanka via the Chagos Islands into Britain, you know, I mean, it surely means that if you can't do that job of advising, then there's not much point in having you.
Yeah, and also if you actually got the practical experience, and because I think that the danger is with the Attorney General, my understanding is that he sees himself more as the kind of lawyer's voice in these different departments rather than vice versa. He's supposed to be arguing the case for getting round some of the judicial review obstacles that have been put in place over many years. And so, as you say, whether it's about whether he's compromised or whether he's just not going to be efficient, I'm curious to see whether or not he does last the full 5 years.
Yeah, I don't think he will. I'm not sure he's going to last this year, actually, because I mean, I'm quite good at predicting. And we haven't had a resignation from the cabinet for a couple of weeks. So I mean, you know, come on, surely we can speed things up a little bit. You know, we had Tulip Siddiq, who might be facing extradition, by the way. Apparently, Bangladeshis want to bring her over there to ask her a few questions about matters pertaining to the house that she was living in London.
Well, Mike, I mean, we're a rule-based system, as Lord Hermer would say. So, you know, first flight out there.
Absolutely right, brilliant. James Hill, thank you very much indeed. Political correspondent at The Spectator.